and let's start with the division winner, the Pittsburgh Steelers, because on these previews, we have been respecting the division winner. Whoever won the division goes first. So even if you guys don't like it, you'll learn to love it. The Steelers are the first team we're going to talk about when it comes to this division. Do you feel like the Steelers are being disrespected after winning the AFC North?
You know, I wrote some good stuff down when I was doing my notes for the show. And how I see it is they were the Panthers of the AFC. And, you know, at least I can give the credit to the Panthers for having a really respectable, competitive game versus a team that we thought would wash them. Like it would be a cakewalk, no doubt about it, in the Rams. But it came down to the last drive and Matthew Stafford being Matthew Stafford for them to move on to that game and go on to the semifinal. At least they were competitive. The issue with the Steelers is we kind of knew what it was. I think we kind of gave the Ravens the benefit of the doubt because they are the Ravens. It's Lamar Jackson. That'd be a little bit more competitive for whatever division winner came out of that one. But when we saw it was the Steelers, I think we all kind of knew the writing was on the wall. For a couple reasons, but mainly the offense just lacked any type of juice, any type of substance. Last season didn't have a real wide receiver too. Their run game was really exciting, but Aaron Rodgers is not the same. That offensive line put him in position where he was unfortunately met with a lot of resistance. And he's just not that same player, unfortunately. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Apparently not with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And his time last year was a bit underwhelming. But this year, you bring in a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. You bring in Michael Pittman to complement DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, a strong physical force, but a speed guy. Then you have Michael Pittman kind of break it down a little bit more on the intermediate, that type of, a little bit more of a technician. And then you have Rico Dowdle coming into that backfield alongside Jalen Warren. Dells, you said it before the show, and it's 100% true. This is a team that usually is a running back by committee, and you'll see some combination of Warren and Rico Dowdle. But I do think Jalen Warren has shown, at least in spurts last season, that he is capable of taking a majority of the load and being that type of running force for them and being efficient on the ground, as he had himself a really great season last year. I think the reservation when I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers is, one, I like a couple more teams in their division more than I like them. And I just think that I look at the two other teams that I have over them in the Bengals and the Ravens, and I just think that they got dramatically better as opposed to the Steelers, where you're running it back with Aaron Rodgers once again. I don't know how I feel about that. The combination of Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf, it is the strongest mid of all time in terms of like solid wide receiver duos. It's maybe if this was a couple years back, we'd be really excited about this. But in 2026, it's just not giving me a good feeling. I think that they can be fine. I think that this team as a whole just screams out fine. TJ Watt is a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he retires tomorrow, 5 years later, he's getting in. The unfortunate thing is he's just not that same high energy player, game breaker that we once knew a couple of years back. He's not as effective as getting to the quarterback, solid in the rush defense, but it's just not that same player that you once had. This is a great defensive line. Do not get me wrong. I think that Derek Harmon going into year 2, he's going to have himself a breakout year. That's going to be my breakout player, especially because last year struggled with staying on the field. Did play a majority, but had the MCL issue early on, missed a couple of games to start, missed a couple of games in between, but was productive in there in the later part of the season for them. I think that he's going to have himself a really strong year, but also understanding that Hayward's getting another year up there. And very soon, we're going to be talking about him hanging it up, and a lot of the responsibility is going to fall onto him. I think it's on him to prove that he can. Listen, it's going to be very hard to fill those shoes, but he's going to have to show that he can at least fill it somewhat. But I just look at the Steelers, and it's just an okay team. It's just an okay roster that I think will be a near 500 team, most likely understanding who they are. 8-9 wins. No Mike Tomlin, so maybe this is the first year they go 8 wins. Shout out to Mike McCarthy. I think the plan this year for them is to try and give it one last ride with Aaron Rodgers. If it doesn't work out, they have the backup plan with Aller, with Howard, and we see where we go from there. I think the McCarthy experience is more than just this year. I do believe that. Maybe it's this year and next, but I think the idea is for them to potentially prime one of these two guys to ascend to that quarterback 1 role after Rodgers is done. But this is a last hurrah. And if you want to believe in the last hurrah and everybody's going to give it this great effort for Aaron Rodgers, I can respect that as a fan of the game. And if you are a fan of Aaron Rodgers, but at the same time, I find myself getting excited for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
This team is better than last year's team.
Yeah, I agree.
Like clearly, on paper, is clearly better than last year's team.
But Aaron's old. They don't have Mike Tomlin anymore.
They go as far as Aaron Rodgers takes them, and for that reason, I don't know.
What did Tomlin do though? Mike Tomlin didn't call plays on offense. Mike Tomlin didn't call plays on defense.
Being a leader of men matters.
I think he creates a safe. He's created a safe bubble and a safe floor for the Steelers team for the past 10, 12, whatever it is years, where you know what you're getting out this team. You know what he can do. You know the type of respect that he garners in the building. But I'm with you. I think like Pittsburgh has quiet talent. Like they in their edge rushing room, they have Nick Herbig, they have Highsmith, T.J. Watt. You mentioned Cam Hayward. Their corners aren't terrible. Joey Porter Jr., Jamal Dean,
and Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah, Asante's at the nickel. Then you have Jalen Ramsey. Like they have quiet talent. Like Pittman, DK. You mentioned it's mid, but it's something you can put out there and be like, okay, they got the rookie Bernard that has been showing out in camp. So like they have quiet talent in the running back room. It really does come down to like how much of a loss is Mike Tomlin, and then like how old is Aaron Rodgers? Like we saw last year. Towards the back end, granted, it was against different competition, but he played a little bit better. But he still, last year throughout the year, you saw him be a little bit up and down, and that was due to, in part, him being of age. And, of course, the offensive line was sporadic at times. I think Pittsburgh, they are more talented than last year. They do have sneaky talent. But like Drew mentioned, the Bengals did get better. And in theory, on paper, the Bengals on paper are a lot better than, what they show you. And then Baltimore. Baltimore is Baltimore. But I do think Pittsburgh, they're a good team. I think it's just like how big of the loss is Mike Tomlin for me, and then, Aaron Rodgers.
I hate to just cast aside what Mike Tomlin did as lucky, because it's not. You need to be a leader of men. You need to have your locker room in order to consistently succeed and be a 500 team every year. But the way I also look at it is that he was in charge of the personnel decisions, and he employed one of the worst offensive coordinators in the league for years on end. You then brought in Arthur Smith, who was a conservative play caller who was not innovative whatsoever. And you also kept Terrell Austin, one of the worst defensive coordinators in the league, employed far longer than he should have been employed. At the very least, this current Steelers team and the way the coaching staff is formed, I know Mike McCarthy is calling the offensive plays, and based off of what he did with Dallas, winning 12 games in multiple seasons, I feel like he gives you at least an okay floor as an offensive play caller. It's probably above what the Steelers have had in the past. And then on defense, Patrick Graham has succeeded with far less defensive talent in previous years. So you don't have the Mike Tomlin and the aura of Mike Tomlin, but you have a better offensive play caller and you have a better defensive play caller. And that overall should net you better results, because how I look at it at the Steelers have a better running back room this year. They have a better receiving room. The offensive line is young and improving, so it'll be better this year as well. They have an awesome defensive line with tons of talent and depth. They have a good secondary. I think the Steelers are a better team than last year, but because they have a first place schedule, they might not showcase that in the wins. But, this team is clearly a 9-8, 500 in the hunt team. They'll be in the playoff mix. I think that the Steelers aren't going to bottom out like some people expected once Tomlin was let go.
But wouldn't that be exactly what Tomlin's given you? 9-8, and you mentioned that this team is better than previous teams.
The schedule matters.
No, I hear where you're coming from, and I'll make it brief so you can talk, Dels. Running back room got better marginally. Rico Dowdle, for the production that Kenny Gainwell gave them, it's marginal.
Well, from Dowdle and Warren versus Gainwell and Warren, I think this is a big upgrade.
Dowdle was really good to start last year. Mm-hmm. Fell off.
And Gainwell
just because of politics. Politics played a huge role in Rico Dowdle falling off.
Gainwell led the team in receptions.
He did.
Gainwell's role is going to be missed. But I also think that, to be fair to you and be honest,
but now Michael Pittman replaces that.
Yeah, Warren's good.
Yeah, agree. But I also think Michael Pittman now getting a real wide receiver 2. In some moments, he could be wide receiver 1. He has those capabilities. I do think that getting Pittman is the real boost here. Getting Dean also matters too. They lost the corner.
James Pierre to Minnesota.
Thank you. And that's a loss. But getting Jamel, it's a good swap.
Yeah, the thing with James Pierre is that he graded out as one of the best corners in the league. He's also nearing 30, and it wasn't on the most volume, and he wasn't a full-time starting corner. But Jamel Dean, his production has slipped over the past couple of years, but you do know for the entirety of his career, he's had the workload of a number one corner.
Definitely.
So I think that it could be an upgrade, I think, in theory. So
you also just know James Pierre is going to go to Minnesota with Brian Flores and just be great.
It's not
exactly.
ideal for the Pittsburgh agenda.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think the Steelers, it's more so just going from Tomlin to McCarthy that is giving people a bad taste in their mouth. That you had this head coach that had been here forever. By the way, Mike Tomlin, the only coach in NFL history to go over 500 9 straight years and never win a playoff game. Like, there was obviously stuff wrong with, although the baseline is super safe, and I feel like we've been in battles and wars with Steelers fans every single year, because every year we say this year they go under 500, and they say, no, it's not. And then we get to the season, it's like, well, you went over 500, but you're not going to do anything. So I feel like maybe they won the battle every year, but big picture, we won the war, because they never are anything, right? Like, every year they're a 500 team. They get to the playoffs, they lose in the first round. The offense is mediocre. They have quarterbacks out there that are usually below, if not way below, league average. So it just feels like it's a continuation of what they've been doing. But in a vacuum, like, Mike McCarthy is still a good coach. You know, there was a stretch where Dak Prescott was healthy. They had 3 years being a top 5 offense. 2 out of the 3 years, they were the number 1 offense in football. Like, I have no question Mike McCarthy is going to come in and be able to improve this offense, especially with, you know, the pieces you guys are talking about. You did upgrade at least the running back room from a rushing department. I think Rico's just a better pure rusher, of course, than Kenny Gainwell is.
Definitely.
The offensive line is improving. You know, it's a young core like we've been talking about. And you do have probably 3 weapons you feel good about, with Giovanni Bernard having a really good training camp. He had a good preseason game in week 1.
Jermaine Bernard? Yeah, you said Giovanni. That's the running back for the Bengals. Yep.
Regardless, you have multiple weapons now you feel good about. In years past, we were waiting on, like, Roman Wilson to break out. You know what I mean? So they do have some options here at pass catcher that you feel good about. And Patrick Graham, too. I do think that's a pretty substantial upgrade over what they've had since 2023. If you guys were to guess where the Raiders have been in EPA per play.
Raiders?
Because Patrick Graham's coming from the
Understood.
Raiders.
Okay.
Where do you think the Raiders are in EPA per play since 2023?
On defense, I would say 21st.
I'm going to say 25.
In terms of defense?
EPA per play.
Their defense has been pretty terrible for a few years. I'm going to throw a bad guess out here, and Dell's going to make me feel dumb, but you know what, whatever. 28.
17th.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
That's like strong.
17th. But you're right, because when you think about the Raiders, you think of Max Crosby, and that's like, what else? You know what I mean? Like, you don't really think of the Raiders as having really any talent on defense, especially when you think of last year's team, where, I mean, everything fell apart. But Patrick Graham has shown multiple years in a row to be able to uplift a subpar defense. And now he's going into a situation that he has by far and away the most talent he's ever had.
Easily.
Right? Like, the amount of pass rushers they have, the interior defensive line depth that they have, like, this front 7 should be elite. And when you're talking about the back end, like, this should be a top 10 defense. You know what I mean? If everyone's able to stay healthy, even if you have some injuries, you mentioned you have 3 edge rushers you feel great about. You have multiple interior defensive linemen you feel great about. Linebackers maybe a little bit questionable, but the secondary you feel good about too. So I think from a defensive perspective, it was already a really talented unit, but now you're adding a true, like, difference maker, it seems like, at play caller. And offensively, I think Rodgers is what he is at this point. I think he's a bottom 10 quarterback. He's going to want to get the ball out quick. If he gets under pressure, he's screwed. He's one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure. But Mike McCarthy's going to be able to at least bring some sort of, I don't want to say innovation, but I think just more consistency on the offensive side of the ball. You know, the Arthur Smith hire was an upgrade what they had previously. I think Mike McCarthy's an upgrade over Arthur Smith. So they're, you know, slowly going in the right direction. I just think a lot of people, us included, I think we should do this, always view the Steelers in big picture lenses, because we know every year, like, you have this baseline. Like, you've proven, we know you can do it, man. Like, we know you can win 9 games. We know you can win 10 games. We know you can go the wild card. But, like, you do it for 9 years. Eventually, we talk to ourselves like, all right, when's it going to change? You know, it's been a decade of you doing the same thing over and over again. And when you hire Mike McCarthy, who, for better or for worse, gets a rep of being a bad postseason coach, it's hard to look at that and be like, wow, they finally got it right, when they could have gone for a younger guy. He's a much better coach than David Culley was in Houston, right? I think he's a much better coach than Culley was, but it kind of gives the same vibe, where it feels like Mike McCarthy is only here for a year or two until they find their next head coach, right? the Steelers have had like 4 head coaches in their history. Every year, every guy lasts 20 years. Mike McCarthy's not lasting 20 years. It does feel like this is a small window with Rodgers than maybe with the young quarterback for a couple of seasons. It just feels like an awkward hire when you should have been going into possibly a different era when you're bringing in an older head coach with an old quarterback kind of running this back again.
Because you're not in the belief of the Drew Allar development
He
plan.
looked good in the preseason.
That,
He did.
Right now, Mike McCarthy, there's the mass scientist Steelers underway. They have
Jeremy
Mike
Bernard.
McCarthy. They have him
Here we go.
with Drew Allar in the quarterback school, making sure that he's developing. We know he got the physical tools. So, you didn't take that into account, Mr. Dubs.
No, but that's why I think he did when he said it's a 1-2 year deal, because that's kind of where I'm at too. I think 2 years because you want to see it through with Rodgers, but then in year 2, you want it while one of these two get the opportunity to start. You have McCarthy in line now for whoever you're going to have next.
Yeah, they're in a good position for this year. I think they have a talented team.